The comic book industry lost a legend this weekend with the passing of writer Len Wein at the age of 69. There really isn't much more that I could say that hasn't already been said about him. He really was one of the most important writers of his era, maybe of all time. He had great runs at both Marvel and DC. He created characters like Swamp Thing and Wolverine. He was the editor of Watchmen and was responsible for revitalizing the X-Men in the 70s when he added Storm, Colossus, Wolverine, and Nightcrawler to the team. I think it's fair to say that without Len Wein's contributions, we just wouldn't have the comic book landscape we have today. He truly was an unsung titan of the industry. I want to talk about Len Wein today, but I don't necessarily want to talk about his comic book work. Instead, I want to talk about the work he did for a TV show that was also influential in its own right and is celebrating an anniversary this year. That's right, friends. About 25 years ago, Len Wein wrote 4 episodes of Batman the Animated Series. Let's take a look. The first episode that Len Wein wrote for Batman the Animated Series was Moon of the Wolf, a name that I wish we could use on this channel somehow. This episode was actually based on a comic Len Wein wrote in the 70s with Neil Adams, also called Moon of the Wolf. It was a mystery story with a horror edge, not too dissimilar to the introduction of Man-Bat only 4 years prior. Now, while the cartoon does take some liberties with the story, it is a very faithful adaptation. I mean, obviously, the guy who wrote the original wrote the episode. But not just in terms of like the little story details here and there, I mean the overall theme and tone. It's a very dark and honestly terrifying episode. I saw it recently as a 30-year-old man and was really surprised at what they could get away with in a 90s kids cartoon. And you can tell that this was written by the guy who created Swamp Thing. The tension and atmosphere, the fear of the unknown, and the grotesque, it's all there. And it's got a wicked guitar solo on the title card. I know Len Wein didn't really have anything to do with that, but it's good stuff. Next up is Off Balance. Now this is an interesting episode to talk about. It's very different from Moon of the Wolf. This is based on the story In the Den of the Death Dealers from Detective Comics 411, written by Denny O'Neil with art by Bob Brown. And this episode definitely feels more like a Denny O'Neil story than a Len Wein story, more grand and adventurous than it is horror-based and mystery-based. But Wein's adaptation is able to capture the tone perfectly. Count Vertigo is the villain in this episode, and his reality-altering abilities never feel out of place with what we've come to expect from this series. Also, this episode, much like the comic it's based on, is the first appearance of Talia al Ghul in the series, and Wein writes her with just the right amount of mystery and intrigue that the character like this needs. It makes us want to see more of her, and we will get to see more of her, but not just yet. First, we gotta get to Wein's 3rd episode, Blind as a Bat. Co-written by Mike Underwood, this episode is not actually based on a pre-existing comic. It's an original story for the animated series. And it is a damn memorable episode, if I do say so myself. I vividly remember this episode from when I was a kid. The shock and horror in Bruce Wayne's face when he finds out he can't see, or the image of Batman with red eyes as he tries to use technology to fight the Penguin. It was just fascinating. It's rare that we get to see a Batman story where he's so helpless and vulnerable, but this is one of the best examples of how to do it right, and in turn winds up being one of my personal favorite episodes of the series. The final episode Len Wein wrote was Demon's Quest Part 2, which he actually co-wrote with Denny O'Neil. O'Neil also wrote Part 1, and these episodes are based on his comics The Daughter of the Demon and The Demon Lives Again, which were illustrated by Neil Adams. This is the classic story of when Batman meets Ra's al Ghul for the very first time, and is adapted to animation flawlessly. Now, if we're going by the credits of the episode, it seems like Len Wein did the bulk of the work for Demon's Quest 2. He co-wrote the story with Denny O'Neil, but he wrote the teleplay solo. But he was able to keep the tone consistent between both episodes and once again bring the grand epicness of a Denny O'Neil comic to the television screen. I mean, all you really have to do is watch the final shirtless sword fight between Ra's and Batman to see how much love and attention this episode got. They went big and it worked. Now, Len Wein wasn't the only comic book writer to work on Batman the Animated Series. A lot of comic book writers actually worked on this show. Again, Denny O'Neil, Mike W. Barr, Marv Wolfman, Elliot S. Maggin, Jerry Conway. All legendary Batman writers in their own right, and all with at least one episode to their name. But Len Wein wrote 4 episodes of Batman the Animated Series, more than any other comic book writer, and not without reason. This was a guy who was game for anything, willing to work on a licensed comic or part of a main canon, willing to work on an adaptation or create something new. Above all else, Len Wein was a fan, and his passion shone through in everything he did. And in return, we not only got some great stories, but some of the greatest stories in whatever medium he was working in. Be it in comics, animation, or whatever, Len Wein was a unique voice that will never be replaced. He will be missed. Let me know down below or anywhere on the internet what some of your favorite Len Wein stories are, and hell, let me know some of your favorite episodes of Batman the Animated Series as well. Let's honor a great writer and a great show at the same time. If you want more Len Wein, check out Swamp Thing, The Bronze Age, or Tales of the Batman by Len Wein. I put Amazon links to both of those in the description below. You will also find an Amazon link to Batman the Animated Series on DVD if you don't already own that for some reason. Of course, new videos every Tuesday and Wednesday. Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern is Wulff Den Live. Make sure you subscribe to see that. Click the little bell icon notification thing so that you get notifications about when we go live. Like this video, share it with a friend, and thank you all for watching. I will see you next time.